Assalamu alaikum everyone. This is Yasmin Qureshi and today's topic of discussion is proteinous hormone, and in proteinous hormone we will be discussing insulin, glucagon, oxytocin and vasopressin. These are the contents of today's lecture. The materials taken and adapted from the book Wilson and Griswold from its 12th edition, and rest of the material is taken from different websites. Okay, first of all, let's discuss what is proteinous hormones. In the previous lecture, we already discussed what hormones are. So let's see what is protein. Proteins are essential to living matter and perform numerous functions as a cellular component. Fundamental cellular events are catalyzed by protein called enzyme, while other proteins serve as the architectural constituent of the protoplasm and the cell membrane. Architectural means building up. So the protoplasm as well as the cell means on the cellular level, the proteins are used for the building up material, and these cells collectively make muscles and the other constituent of the body. Although there are many different hormones in the human body, they can be divided into three classes based on their chemical structure. So, the hormones, a variety of the hormones are present in the body, but over here we are classifying the hormones on the basis of the chemical structure. Number one is lipid drive, which we already discussed in the previous lecture as the steroidal hormone. Second is amino acid derived, means the hormones which are derived from the amino acid, means the fundamental unit or the structural basis of that is the amino acid. Third one is the peptide hormones, which include peptides and the protein, means with these are also proteinous hormone, but they are much larger than this amino acid derived. One of the key distinguishing features of the lipid-derived hormone is that they can diffuse across plasma membrane, whereas the amino acid-derived and the peptide hormone cannot. The reason we already discussed in the previous lecture, because the lipid-derived have the chemical structure that is the steroidal, which can cross the lipid bilayer of the plasma membrane, whereas the other two types cannot cross the plasma membrane as the first one do. Now, because this is already discussed, so let's discuss what are the difference between these two type of the hormones. Amino acid derived hormones. The amino acid derived hormones are relatively small molecule, okay, derived from the amino acid, example tyrosine and the tryptophan. If a hormone is amino acid derived, its chemical name will end with the "ene". So you will see in the hormones which are the amino acid hormone, all these hormones derive from the "ene". Keeping in mind the amino acid hormones are derived, means they are derived from the amino acid. This is the name of the amino acid. These are not the hormones. Maybe you must be thinking that this over here is an. These are the structural unit of the hormones which are called as the amino acid hormone. Examples of the amino acid derived hormones include epinephrine and norepinephrine, which are synthesized in the medulla of the adrenal gland, the thyroxine, which is produced from the thyroid gland, and melatonin, produced by the pineal gland, which we are not going in details of these hormones because it is not included in our syllabus. Just to have an overview what are the different other types of the amino acid rather than the peptide or rather than the hormones, protein and hormones which are included in our syllabus. Next is the peptide hormones. The structure of the peptide hormone is that of the polypeptide chain of the amino acid. Okay, this I was explaining that these are also the proteinous hormone, but they are smaller, whereas the peptide hormone are the combination of the various amino acid, long chain of the amino acid, polypeptide, not the monopeptide or oligopeptide. The peptide hormones include molecules that are short polypeptide, such as antidiuretic hormone and oxytocin produced in the brain and released into the blood in the posterior pituitary gland. These are the example of some of the peptide hormone. This class also includes small proteins such as growth hormones produced by the pituitary and the large glycoproteins such as the follicle stimulating hormone produced by the pituitary. This is the structure of the peptide hormone. This over here, number A is the oxytocin, B is the growth hormone, C is the follicle stimulating. As shown, these peptide hormones are much larger than those derived from the cholesterol or the amino acid. So you can see their structure. Obviously, we cannot draw their structure, just for your understanding that these are quite big in structure. Now let's discuss mechanism of action, as we have already discussed in the previous lecture, and it is quite similar. So let's have an overview. Secreted peptides such as insulin are stored within the vesicles in the cell which synthesize them. So the insulin or these hormones, peptide hormones, are stored in the vesicles in the cells which synthesize them until they are required. Let's see in the picture. You can see in the secretory cell, these these are the peptides hormone or the hormone. They are stored in it until they are released in response to the stimuli, such as in the case of the insulin, if there is a high blood sugar, then these are released from the cell. Now, third important point is the amino acid or the peptide hormones are water soluble and insoluble in lipids. These hormones cannot cross the plasma membrane, which we already discussed in the previous slide. Therefore, their receptors are found on the surface of the target cell. This can come in your MCQ, that you can see because they can cross the plasma membrane. Okay, so their receptors are present on the surface, but it is not present on the target cell, or these are secreted into the blood vessel, reach to the target cell and then bind to the receptor. Cells can have many receptors for the same hormone, but often also possess receptors for the different types of the hormones. Okay, it is not compulsory that the cell contain only one type of the receptor, not other. It can have many different receptors for the same hormone or the different hormone. The number of the receptors that respond to the hormone determine the cell sensitivity to that receptor and resulting cellular response. Additionally, the number of receptors that respond to a hormone can change over time. Okay, it can change over time, resulting in increase or decrease in the cell sensitivity. So if by the age these cells, or by the certain other diseases, the sensitivity is decreased, and the same mechanism which was very active in the younger age is not responding similarly due to the decrease of the sensitivity of these receptors. In the upregulation of any of the hormone, the number of the receptor increase in response to rising hormone level, making the cell more sensitive to the hormone, allowing for more cellular activity. When the number of the receptor decrease in response to rising hormone level, called the downregulation, cellular activity is reduced. This I think we have discussed in the tamoxifen, the upregulation of the growth hormone, downregulation of the growth hormone. So for your reminder, upregulation is when there is a increase in the response. Okay, downregulation when there is the activity is reduced. Okay, let's discuss insulin, which is our first proteinous hormone included in our syllabus. Insulin is synthesized by island beta cells of pancreas from a single 86 amino acid polypeptide precursor proinsulin. The name proinsulin, as indicated, pro before insulin, means it is a precursor of the insulin, which is the 80 amino acid polypeptide protein. Okay, let's see where the beta cells of the pancreas present. You can see over here in this box, you can see the pancreas is present in the digestive tract, near the digestive tract. This over here is the small intestine, and you can see gallbladder, and in the pancreas the pancreatic duct is there, as well as you can see pancreatic island, and in this pancreatic island there are different types of cells present. Okay, islands of Langerhans, alpha cell, beta, these are the beta cells over here, which are responsible for the synthesis of the insulin. And insulin is synthesized from the proinsulin, and proinsulin is synthesized from the preproinsulin. Proinsulin itself synthesized in the polyribosome of the rough endoplasmic reticulum, means within the cell in the rough endoplasmic reticulum, the protein larger precursor proinsulin is synthesized, from which the insulin is synthesized, Insulin was the first protein from which a complete amino acid sequence was determined. This is talking about the scientist who discovered the insulin. Insulin complete amino acid sequence was discovered, and it was being the first protein to be discovered as the complete sequence. Insulin has pronounced effect on the metabolism of the carbohydrate, lipids, and protein. This we will discuss in detail in the later slide. Mechanism of action of the insulin. The principal substrate that stimulate the release of the insulin from the islands of the beta cell is glucose. So it is the stimuli or the substrates which results in the release of the insulin. Insulin lowers blood glucose level by enhancing the rate of glucose uptake and utilization by the target cell, which use glucose for the ATP production. So if there is a glucose in the blood or in the body, insulin is released, and insulin lower the blood glucose level. How? By taking up the glucose and converting into the ATP or the energy production. It also stimulates the liver to convert glucose to glycogen as a reserve, which is then stored by the cell for the later use. So if the for rapid energy is not required, then the glucose is converted into glycogen, which is the stored energy for the later use. As insulin binds to its target cell via insulin receptors and signal transaction, it triggers the cell to incorporate glucose transport protein into the membrane. This allows glucose to enter the cell, which it can be used as a energy source. So there are different pathways, and how the insulin is working. Insulin first bind to the receptor, okay, and then it triggers the glucose transport, and then this allows glucose to enter the cell, where it can be used as an energy source. We will see it in the diagram in the later slide. These action mediated by insulin cause blood glucose concentration to fall, Now, when the glucose is in the blood, the insulin is decreasing the amount of the glucose by taking up by utilizing by the target cell. Either it is converting into ATP, either it is stored into the different glycogen or any other form. Then what is happening? The amount of the glucose is falling down, or it is decreased. Okay, so this condition is called hypoglycemic, or the low blood glucose level, which inhibits the further insulin release from the beta cell through the negative feedback. So it is a complete cycle. If there is a high glucose level in the blood, the insulin will release. When the by the release of the insulin, when the glucose is being converted in the body in the various form, then the low blood glucose level will be there, that is called hypoglycemia. This low blood glucose level is the indication that the insulin should not be released further. So it is a negative feedback loop to indicate that there no further requirement of the insulin is there. This is the picture showing that you can see insulin is present and it is binding to the insulin receptor. You can see the glucose entering into the cell through the glucose transporter. Okay, and when insulin acting, this insulin when acting on the glucose, converting it into the glycogen, or it is converting into the pyruvate, then pyruvate is converted into the fatty acid. So the hormone insulin bind to the receptor first, which start many protein activation cascade. This include translocation of the GLUT4, okay, to the plasma membrane, and influx of the glucose, glycogen synthesis, glycolysis, and the triglyceride. Glycolysis is the breakdown of the glucose by enzyme, releasing the energy and the pyruvic acid or pyruvate. Now let's discuss the biological activity of the insulin. Insulin enters the portal vein and about 50% is removed in its first passage through the liver. The plasma half-life of insulin is approximately 4 minutes. In addition to the glucose, other substrate, example amino acid, free fatty acid, and the ketone bodies also can stimulate insulin secretion directly. Means previously we discussed that the glucose is the substrate which cause the release of the insulin, but sometimes amino acid, free fatty acid, or the ketone body can also stimulate the release of the insulin secreting, and the ACTH can directly stimulate insulin secretion. Secretin is a hormone that regulates the water hemostasis throughout the body. It is also the peptide hormone. Whereas ACTH is also called the adenotropic hormone. It is the hormone which stimulate the secretion of the other glucocorticoid hormones from the adrenal glands, which are related with the various other functioning, just as such as anti-stress, or which are related to the Addison disease, or related to the other hormones of the pituitary gland and the hypothalamus. Glucagon and the other related peptide can increase the secretion of the insulin, whereas the somatostatin inhibits its secretion. Glucagon is again a peptide hormone. It is also produced by the alpha cells of the pancreas, and it is a main catabolic hormone. Means if the concentration of the glucose or fatty acid in the body is less, or in the bloodstream is less, it is released to increase the concentration of the glucose in the blood. And the other related can increase the secretion of the insulin, whereas somatostatin, which is the growth hormone inhibiting hormone, is decreasing or inhibiting the secretion of the insulin. So repeating the point, glucagon, it is raising the blood glucose level. So once the blood glucose level is increased, obviously it is causing the increase in the secretion of the insulin. but whereas the growth inhibiting hormone is inhibiting the secretion of the insulin. Elevated levels of the circulated insulin decreases the number of the insulin receptor on the target cells and vice versa. So means if there is the abnormal elevated level of the insulin in the body, then it will result in the decreased number of the insulin receptors, and if there is the decreased level, vice versa, if there is a abnormally decreased level of the insulin, it will also increase the number of the insulin receptors. Other factors that affect insulin binding to its receptor include pH, temperature, membrane lipid composition, and the ionic strength. These are the factors affecting the insulin binding to the receptor. High glucose level to also result in the less water being reabsorbed by the kidney, causing high amount of the urine to be produced. This may result in the dehydration. This side effects you must have observed in the diabetic patient, that they have the high amount of the urine. Why? Because of the high glucose level in the blood. Okay, there is the less water being reabsorbed by the kidney. So that's why if there is a less water being reabsorbed by the kidney, means more amount of the urine is formed and the more production of the urine is there, which results in the, because the water is not reabsorbed by the kidney, there results in the dehydration. Over time, high blood glucose level can cause nerve damage to the eye, means the people who are not being treated properly and they have the high glucose level, over time their eyes will be affected, as well as the peripheral body tissues, as well as the damage to the kidney and the cardiovascular system if the high blood glucose level is not being maintained, then these eyes, kidney, and the cardiovascular system is also affected. Over secretion of the insulin can cause the hypoglycemia. Obviously, if the insulin is more quantity of the glucose is being removed from the body, resulting in the hypoglycemia or the low blood glucose level. This causes insufficient glucose availability to the cell, often leading to the muscle weakness, because the glucose availability is not there, ATP are not formed, energy is not formed, resulting in the muscle weakness. It can sometimes cause unconsciousness or death if left untreated, means the glucose is directly related to the production of the energy, and the brain needs the continuous supply of the glucose. If there is the over secretion of the insulin in the body, the glucose availability will not be there, and when the glucose is not reaching to the brain, which may result in the unconsciousness as well as death. In muscle and the adipose tissues, insulin promotes transport of the glucose and other monosaccharide across the cell membrane. It also facilitates transport of the amino acid, potassium ion nucleoside, and the ionic phosphate. So there are the other activities of the insulin in the muscle and the adipose tissue. You can see that it helps in the transportation. Insulin also activates certain enzyme kinases, glycogen synthetase in muscle and the adipose tissue. So basically, insulin, when it is involved in the synthesis of the ATP, and that ATP and the glucose is responsible for the various mechanisms, such as the production of the kinases and the synthetase in the muscle and the adipose tissue. Insulin also facilitates the incorporation of the intracellular amino acid into protein, the anabolic processes. Regulation of the insulin secretion is affected by numerous factors, such as secretion is affected by the food. Previously, we discussed about the receptor binding to of insulin. Over here, we are discussing the insulin secretion is affected by food, hormonal or the neuronal stimuli, and the ionic mechanisms. In skeletal muscle, insulin predominantly stimulates translation by increasing the rate of initiation of the protein synthesis and the number of ribosomes. Translation is one of the processes during the synthesis of the messenger RNA or the synthesis of the protein. So insulin is stimulating the translation by increasing the rate of the protein synthesis and the number of ribosomes. In adipose tissue, it has the anti-lipolytic action. Anti-lipolytic action is effect opposing the breakdown of the fatty acid triglyceride. Okay, it also decreases the supply of the glycerol to the liver. Thus, at these two sites, insulin decreases the availability of the precursor for the formation of the triglyceride. So you can say that the insulin is inhibiting the formation of the triglyceride in the tissues. Now let's discuss the diabetes mellitus. Why? Because it is the condition caused by the decreased secretion of the insulin, okay, or the reduced sensitivity or responsiveness to the insulin. So in the diabetes mellitus, either there is the decreased secretion of insulin, reduced sensitivity, or the decreased responsiveness to the insulin by the target tissue. Any one of these conditions can be possible. There are two major types which we already know, that type 1 insulin dependent diabetes mellitus, type 2 non-insulin dependent diabetes mellitus. Type 1, also known as the juvenile onset diabetes mellitus, is characterized by the destruction of the pancreatic beta cell, means the secretion of the insulin is affected in this type of the diabetes mellitus, resulting in the decreased insulin secretion. Now the reasons may be autoimmune complexes or the viruses have been mentioned as two possible causes of the beta cell destruction. Generally, type 1 diabetes receptor sensitivity to insulin is not decreased. So only there is the decrease of the insulin, but there is the sensitivity is not decreased. Type 2 diabetes, also known as the adult onset diabetes, is characterized primarily by the insulin receptor defects or post-insulin receptor defects. So it is related to the receptor activity. Okay, and it is also called as the adult onset diabetes. There is no destruction to the beta cell in type 2, and the insulin secretion is relatively normal. In reality, however, the two types of diabetes show considerably overlap of the clinical features. You can see in the diabetes mellitus can cause wide range of symptoms, including nausea, vomiting, blurred vision, lethargy, and the frequency in the urination, high level of the glucose in the urine, which these all are you can see in the pictorial. Now, some of the insulin preparation, how these preparation were synthesized. Amorphous insulin was the first form made available for the clinical use. Further purification afforded the crystalline insulin, which is now commonly called regular insulin. Insulin injection USP is made from the zinc insulin crystal. For some time, regular insulin solution have been prepared at the pH of 2.8 to 3.5. If the pH was increased above the acidic range, particles would be formed. More highly purified insulin, however, can be maintained in the solution over a wider range pH. Even when unbuffered, neutral insulin solution have the greater stability than the acidic solutions. Okay, so pH was the factor which was affecting its preparation. If there in the regular insulin, if the pH level was 2.8 or 3.5, if that pH is increased, there will be the formation of the particle which was not good for the formulation or the insulin preparation available. But if there is a highly purified insulin, then it can be of the wider pH range even when it is unbuffered. Neutral insulin solution have the greater stability. A major disadvantage of the regular insulin is its short duration of action, 5 to 7 hours, which necessitates its administration several times daily. Okay, let's discuss the next proteinous hormone, that is the glucagon. Glucagon is also called as the hyperglycemic glycogenolytic hormone. Hyperglycemic means increase amount of the glucose in the blood, and it is also called as the glycogenolytic, means the hormone which is increasing the glucose concentration in the blood. And the glycogenolytic or the glycogenolysis is the process of breaking down of the glycogen into the glucose. Okay, and this hormone is also released from the beta cells of the pancreas. Means if there is the increased amount of the glucose in the blood, then there is the release of the insulin. If if you can see in the diagram, it is the cycle that if if there is the high blood glucose level, if there is a high blood glucose level, the pancreas will release the insulin. Okay, so the insulin is what insulin is doing, insulin is causing the conversion of the glucose into the glycogen. Okay, and when there is the low, you can see this process. When the glucose is converted into the glycogen, there is a low blood glucose level, and when the lower blood glucose level, the signal is sent to the pancreas to release the glucagon, and the glucagon is responsible for the conversion of the glycogen into the glucose, which is raising the blood glucose level, which is also called as the hyperglycemic, or conversion of the glycogen into glucose is the glycogenolysis. Okay, this glucagon is contain 29 amino acid residue. Glucagon has been isolated from the amorphous fraction of the commercially available insulin sample, 4.4% glucagon. When the blood glucose level declines below normal level, for example between meals or when the glucose is utilized during exercise, the hormone glucagon is released from the pancreas. Glucagon raises blood glucose level, eliciting with what is called hyperglycemic effect by stimulating the breakdown of the glycogen to glucose in the skeletal muscle cell and in the liver cells in the process called glycogenolysis. Over here you can see only the diagram of the liver, but it is taking place into the other cells of the body also. Glucagon also stimulates absorption of the amino acid from the blood by the liver, which then convert into the glucose. Okay, the process is called the gluconeogenesis. Means when the glucose is not available, as well as the glycogen is also not available, then the amino acid is being converted into the glucose, and the process is called glyconeogenesis. Rising blood glucose level inhibit further glucagon release from the pancreas. So it is what is the indication to stop the release of the glucagon is the high blood glucose level. Okay, where the negative feedback mechanism. In this way, insulin and the glucagon work together to maintain the homeostatic glucose level of the body. Fatty acid synthesis is decreased by the glucagon. Cholesterol formation is also reduced. Glucagon activates liver lipases, however, and stimulates ketogenesis. Ultimately, the availability of the fatty acid from the liver triglyceride is elevated. Lipases, it is an enzyme that catalyzes the hydrolysis of the fats, whereas the ketogenesis is the biochemical process in which the ketone bodies are produced through the breakdown of the fatty acid and the ketogenic amino acid. So ultimately, due to the glucagon, the availability of the fatty acid from the liver triglyceride is elevated. It is recommended for the treatment of the severe hypoglycemic reaction caused by the administration of the insulin to the diabetic or the psychiatric patient. Of course, this treatment is effective only when the hepatic glycogen is available. Okay, so when it is given as the medication in the condition hypoglycemic condition, it is important that the hepatic glycogen is available in the body. Nausea and the vomiting are the most frequent encountered reaction of the glucagon. Okay, last two hormones which are remaining are the vasopressin and the oxytocin. These both hormones are the source of the posterior pituitary, which is also called as the neurohypophysis. This name neurohypophysis is given to the portion of the posterior pituitary, which is also the which is the part of the pituitary gland. Basically, it is derived from the embryonic brain, which is composed of the infundibulum and the neural lobe. So that's why this name is given neurohypophysis. Okay, and also called as the posterior pituitary. Vasopressin is also known as the pituitary antidiuretic hormone, or most commonly ADH. You can see in the diagram both are released from the in the pituitary from the posterior pituitary part over here. Okay, this pituitary gland is present, you can see near the hypothalamus. Okay, and there are various part to it. You can see in the hypothalamus there is the superior hypophyseal artery, and there is the infundibulum. Okay, that's why the name is given neurohypophysis to the to this part of the pituitary. ADH and the oxytocin are produced by the neurons in the hypothalamus and transported within these axons along with the infundibulum to the posterior pituitary. Keeping in mind that these two hormones are produced by the neurons in the hypothalamus. Okay, they are being stored in the posterior pituitary. So when you are reading that the hormones, these are the hormones of the posterior pituitary, basically they are stored in the posterior pituitary. They are being produced in the hypothalamus. From this part, from this part they are produced, and then they are stored over here. They are released into the circulatory system via neural signaling from the hypothalamus. When there is a signal reach to the hypothalamus, when there is any stimuli, they are released from the hypothalamus. These hormones are considered to be the posterior pituitary hormone, even though they are produced by the hypothalamus, since that is where they are released into the circulatory system. The posterior pituitary itself does not produce hormone, but instead stores hormone produced by the hypothalamus, releasing them into. Okay, vasopressin has two primary functions. First one is to retain water in the body, and the second function is to constrict blood vessels. The hormones regulates the body's retention of water by acting to increase the water reabsorption by in the collecting ducts of the kidney nephron. This hormone can affect graded changes in the permeability of the distal portion of the mammalian nephron. This is talking about the kidney, resulting in either conservation of the excretion of water, thus it modulates the renal tubular reabsorption of the water. So it basically retain water by affecting on the kidney. On which part it is affecting? It is changing the permeability of the distal portion of the nephron, okay, distal convoluted tubules, as well as it modulates the renal tubular means on the tubular part it is causing the reabsorption of water back into the body and not to be excreted out into the in the urine. The non-renal action of the vasopressin include the vasoconstriction effect and the neurotransmitter action in the central nervous system, such as regulation of the ACTH secretion, circulation, and the body temperature. So the body temperature, circulation, and the vasoconstriction, they are all closely related. ADH is therapeutically used in the treatment of the diabetes insipidus of the pituitary origin. Diabetes insipidus is the condition characterized by the large amount of the dilute urine and the increased thirst. The amount of the urine is so much so that it is around 20 liters per day. So ADH is also used in the treatment of this type of diabetes. It is also used to relieve the intestinal paresis and distension. This intestinal paresis is also called as the gastroparesis. It is the delayed gastric emptying and the distension of the GIT. So ADH can also be used in this condition. This you can write in the indication of the vasopressin, where there is therapeutically used. Vasopressin tannate or the pitressin tannate is a insoluble tannate of the vasopressin administered intramuscularly 1.5 to 5 pressure units daily. A pressure is a unit for the measurement. Basically, one pressure unit is equivalent to 0.5 milligram. Okay, so this 1.5 pressure units of daily intramuscular vasopressin tannate is given for its prolonged duration of action by the slow release of the vasopressin. It is particularly useful for the patient who have diabetes insipidus, but it should never to be used intravenously in this condition. Oxytocin. Oxytocin is appropriately named because of its oxytoxic action. Oxytoxic means the stimulation of the involuntary muscles of the uterus, promoting or accelerating childbirth. Oxytocin, known as the bonding hormone, has roles in various behaviors including social recognition, pair bonding, anxiety, and the maternal behaviors. The hormone has been found to be released in the large amounts after distension of the cervix and uterus during labor, facilitating birth, maternal bonding, and lactation. Oxytocin exerts a stimulating effect on the smooth muscles of the uterus and mammary gland and has relaxing effect on the vascular smooth muscle when administered in the high doses. It is considered the drug of choice to induce labor, particularly in cases of the intrapartum hypotonic inertia. This hypotonic inertia is a condition in which there is the infrequent uterine contraction and there is a weak and the shorter duration of the contractions are there. So in those conditions, oxytocin can be administered for the to induce labor. Oxytocin also is used in the inevitable or incomplete abortion after 20th week of the gestation so that the labor can be induced. It also may be used to prevent or control hemorrhage and to correct uterine hypotonicity. Hypotonicity means lacking normal tone or tension, or having a lower osmotic pressure than that of specified. It is used to promote milk ejection by contracting the myoepithelium of the mammary glands. Oxytocin is usually administered parenterally by intravenous infusion, intravenous injection, or intramuscular injection. Oxytocin citrate buccal tablets are also available, but the rate of the absorption is unpredictable and the buccal administration is less precise. Topical administration, nasal spray 2 or 3 minutes before nursing to promote the milk ejection is sometimes recommended. Thank you so much. This was all about your last lecture of the proteinous hormone. I tried my best to reduce as much as possible as your syllabus is already more than enough, and I pray that you have success in your exam and pass your exam with great marks. Thank you so much.